The bullet had carved through Henry Palmer's shoulder 3 years ago, but the scar across his heart ran deeper than any piece of lead could manage. He stood at the edge of San Diego's dusty Main Street in the afternoon heat of 1878, watching families pass by with their laughter and easy affection, feeling like a ghost among the living. San Diego, California, had grown considerably since the railroad rumors started circulating, bringing new faces and new possibilities to the sun-baked town near the Mexican border. Henry had drifted here 6 months ago, taking work at the livery stable because horses never asked questions and never expected more than he could give. At 28, he felt ancient, hollowed out by memories of the war and everything that came after. The shoulder wound had healed badly, leaving him with limited movement in his left arm. Some days it ached something fierce, but that pain was nothing compared to the weight he carried inside. He had learned to live with both, accepting them as penance for sins he could not wash away no matter how many miles he put between himself and the past. "Palmer," old Marcus Hendricks called from the stable entrance. "Got a customer needs help with a wagon wheel. You able?" Henry nodded and headed back, grateful for the distraction work provided. He had become good at keeping busy, at filling every moment so his mind could not wander to places it should not go. The customer turned out to be a merchant heading east, and Henry set about examining the cracked wheel with practiced efficiency. He was elbow-deep in grease when he heard the commotion down the street. Raised voices, a woman's sharp protest, then the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. Henry wiped his hands and moved toward the noise despite himself, his instinct to help still intact even when everything else felt broken. A young woman stood in the middle of the street, her dark hair falling loose from its pins, facing down two men who looked like they had been drinking since breakfast. Her traveling bag lay in the dust, its contents scattered. She was perhaps 23 or 24, with eyes that flashed green fire even from a distance. "I said no thank you to your assistance," she said firmly, her voice carrying a slight northeastern accent. "I'm perfectly capable of managing on my own." "Aw, don't be like that, sweetheart," one of the men slurred, reaching for her arm. "We're just being neighborly." Henry was moving before he made the conscious decision, his boots eating up the distance between them. "Lady says she does not need help," he said quietly. The two men turned to face him, and Henry recognized them as drifters who hung around the saloons looking for trouble. "This ain't your business, cripple," the taller one said, noting the way Henry's left arm hung slightly awkward at his side. "It is now," Henry replied, his voice still low but carrying an edge that made both men reassess. He might be damaged, but he was also 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and hands that had seen their share of fighting. More importantly, his eyes held the flat, distant look of a man who had already survived the worst life could throw at him and had nothing left to lose. The drunk men exchanged glances, then seemed to decide this particular bit of entertainment was not worth the trouble. They shuffled off muttering curses, leaving Henry alone with the woman whose belongings decorated the street like fallen leaves. "Thank you," she said, immediately kneeling to gather her scattered possessions. Henry joined her, carefully collecting a hairbrush, several books, and what looked like teaching certificates. Up close, she was even prettier than he had first thought, with freckles across her nose and an expression of determined independence that reminded him of a wild Mustang refusing the bridle. "You new to San Diego?" he asked, handing her the certificates. "Just arrived on this morning's stage," she confirmed. "I'm to be the new schoolteacher, Catherine Turner, though everyone calls me Kate." She offered her hand like a man would, direct and confident. Henry hesitated before taking it, hyper-aware of the grease still under his nails despite his wiping. Henry Palmer. I work at the livery. Her handshake was firm, and she did not pull away from his calloused grip with the distaste some women showed. Well, Mr. Palmer, I'm in your debt. Those men were quite insistent. They were drunk, Henry said, stuffing her remaining items back into the bag. You'll want to avoid the saloons on the east end of town, especially after dark. Most folks here are decent, but we get our share of troublemakers. I'll keep that in mind, Kate said, accepting her bag from him. Their fingers brushed during the transfer, and Henry felt a jolt run through him that had nothing to do with static electricity. He pulled back quickly, shoving his hands in his pockets. Schoolhouse is on Maple Street, he offered, pointing with his chin. 3 blocks that way. You'll be boarding with Mrs. Sullivan, I expect. She takes in the teachers. Yes, exactly right, Kate said, studying him with open curiosity. Henry had learned to hate that look, the way people tried to figure out what was wrong with him beyond the obvious physical damage. But in Kate's eyes, he saw something different: interest rather than pity, questions rather than judgment. I should get back to work, he said abruptly, tipping his hat. Welcome to San Diego, Miss Turner. He walked away before she could respond, feeling her gaze on his back until he turned the corner. His heart was hammering in a way it had not done in years, and the sensation made him angry at himself. He had learned his lesson about hope and wanting things he could not have. Better to keep his head down, do his work, and not let anyone get close enough to see the full extent of his brokenness. But over the following days, avoiding Kate Turner proved harder than he anticipated. San Diego was not so large a town that people could remain strangers for long, and Kate seemed determined to get to know everyone. She appeared at the livery 2 days after their first meeting, leading a rented mare that needed new shoes. Mr. Palmer, she greeted him with a smile that could have powered the town's lamps for a week. Fancy meeting you here. This is where I work, Henry pointed out, taking the mare's reins. The horse was a gentle bay with kind eyes, exactly the sort of mount he would have chosen for someone new to the area. Yes, well, Mrs. Sullivan suggested I come see you specifically. She says you're the best farrier in the county. Kate leaned against the fence rail, clearly intending to stay and watch. Most customers dropped off their animals and returned later, but of course, Kate Turner could not make things easy. Mrs. Sullivan is being generous, Henry muttered, leading the mare to the work area. I'm competent, nothing more. I doubt that, Kate said cheerfully. People who are merely competent don't get recommended by name. Tell me, Mr. Palmer, how long have you lived in San Diego? 6 months, he answered shortly, examining the mare's hooves. The shoes were worn, but not dangerously so. Another few weeks and they would have been a problem, and before that, other places. Henry set down the mare's front hoof and moved to the back, painfully aware of Kate's attention on him. You settling in all right, teaching going well? Nice attempt to redirect the conversation, Kate observed. But yes, teaching is going wonderfully. The children here are bright and eager to learn. Some of them have had so little formal education, but they soak up knowledge like desert earth soaking up rain. It's incredibly rewarding. Despite himself, Henry found his lips twitching toward a smile. Kate's enthusiasm was infectious, bursting out of her like water from an overfilled bucket. That's good, he said, and meant it. I'm starting an evening reading program for the adults who never learned properly, Kate continued. We'll meet twice a week at the schoolhouse. Would you be interested in attending? The question caught Henry off guard. He set down the mare's hoof and straightened, meeting Kate's eyes directly for the first time since she arrived. I can read just fine, Miss Turner. Oh, I didn't mean to imply, Kate's cheeks flushed pink. I just thought you might enjoy the company or the discussion of literature. We'll be reading aloud and talking about the stories. It's as much social as educational. "I'm not much for socializing," Henry said flatly, turning back to his work. "But I'm sure you'll find plenty of interested folks." Silence stretched between them, and Henry felt a twinge of guilt for his brusqueness. Kate had done nothing to deserve his rudeness except try to be friendly. But friendly led to questions, and questions led to answers he could not give without revealing exactly how damaged he was underneath the physical scars. "All right," Kate finally said, her voice quieter. "Well, the offer stands if you change your mind. How much do I owe you for the shoeing?" They completed the transaction in awkward silence, and Henry watched her lead the mare away with something uncomfortably like regret churning in his gut. He told himself it was better this way, that he had done them both a favor by keeping his distance. Kate Turner deserved someone whole and undamaged, someone who could match her bright optimism with their own light instead of dragging her down into darkness. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Henry kept running into Kate around town with a frequency that felt almost orchestrated by some mischievous higher power. She was at the general store when he stopped in for supplies, at the restaurant when he grabbed a rare meal out, even at the church social he had been dragged to by Marcus Hendrick's well-meaning wife. Each encounter was polite but strained, with Henry keeping his responses brief, and Kate clearly puzzled by his standoffishness. He could see the questions in her eyes, the confusion about why he held himself so apart when she was trying to be friendly. Sometimes he caught her watching him with an expression that looked almost sad, as if his isolation bothered her personally. It all came to a head on a Saturday afternoon in late October. Henry was exercising one of the boarding horses in the corral behind the stable when he heard a child's scream pierce the air. He dropped the lead rope and ran toward the sound, his bad shoulder forgotten in the spike of adrenaline. He found the situation in the alley between the feed store and the bank, a young boy, maybe 10 years old, backed against the wall by a rattlesnake coiled and ready to strike. The snake was a big one, probably 3 feet long, and the boy was frozen with terror, smart enough not to make any sudden moves. Henry's hand went to his belt, but he had left his gun at the stable. He scanned the ground and found what he needed: a thick branch that had broken off one of the trees lining the street. Moving slowly and deliberately, he approached from the snake's blind side, every sense focused on the serpent's movements. "Don't move," he told the boy quietly. Not even a little bit. The rattlesnake's attention shifted to Henry, recognizing the new threat. Its tail buzzed like 1,000 angry wasps, and Henry could see its muscles tensing for a strike. He waited, patient, knowing he would only get one chance at this. His left arm might be weak, but his right was strong, and his timing was still good when it needed to be. The snake struck at the boy. Henry's branch came down simultaneously, catching the snake just below its head and pinning it to the ground. The serpent thrashed wildly, but Henry kept the pressure firm, using his boot to hold down its body while he pulled out his belt knife with his free hand. "Close your eyes, son," he said to the boy, then made the cut quick and clean. The snake's thrashing stopped. Henry released a breath he had not known he was holding and turned to the child, who was shaking like a leaf. "You all right? It didn't get you?" The boy shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "I was just taking a shortcut and I didn't see it until—" "Hey now, you're fine," Henry said, his voice gentler than he knew it could be. "You did exactly right by staying still. That was smart thinking." A small crowd had gathered at the alley entrance, drawn by the commotion. Among them was Kate, her face pale but her eyes bright with relief as she pushed through to reach them. "Tommy Hendricks, your mother is going to faint when she hears about this," she said, pulling the boy into a fierce hug. Henry realized this must be Marcus Hendrick's grandson, which explained why the child looked vaguely familiar. Kate looked up at Henry over Tommy's head, and the gratitude in her expression made his chest tighten. "Thank you, Mr. Palmer. If you had not been here—" "Someone else would have handled it," Henry said dismissively, wiping his knife clean on his pants before sheathing it. He could feel the crowd's attention on him, could hear their murmured thanks and approval, and it made his skin crawl. He did not want their praise or their admiration. He had simply done what needed doing. "That was mighty brave," old Charlie Dawson said, clapping Henry on the shoulder. "The good one, fortunately. Quick thinking, too. That boy owes you his life." "I was just in the right place," Henry muttered, edging toward escape. But Kate still held his gaze, and he could see that she understood something had shifted, that she was reassessing her previous impressions of him. Later that evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Henry sat on the porch of his small, rented room behind the livery, nursing a whiskey and trying not to think about green eyes and grateful smiles. A knock on his door frame, the door itself was open to catch the cooling air, made him look up. Kate stood there in a simple blue dress, holding a covered basket that smelled divine. "I brought you dinner," she said simply. "May I come in?" Henry wanted to say no, wanted to maintain the walls he had so carefully constructed. But something in Kate's expression, determination, mixed with a vulnerability he had not seen before, made him nod and gesture to the other chair on his small porch. She sat, uncovering the basket to reveal fried chicken, fresh bread, and apple pie. "Mrs. Sullivan and I made extra, and I thought you might appreciate a home-cooked meal." "That's kind of you," Henry said carefully, accepting the plate she handed him. The food was excellent, but he barely tasted it, too aware of Kate's presence beside him. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Kate spoke. "You saved Tommy's life today." "I killed a snake," Henry corrected. "Not the same thing." "It absolutely is the same thing," Kate insisted. "And I've been watching you, Mr. Palmer." "Henry," he interrupted. "If we're sharing meals, you might as well call me Henry." A small smile played at Kate's lips. "Henry, then, and I'm Kate." "What I was saying is that I've been watching you since I arrived in San Diego, and I cannot figure you out." "Nothing to figure out," Henry said, staring at his plate. "I'm just a man who works with horses." "You're a man who keeps himself apart," Kate said gently. "A man who acts like he does not deserve kindness or friendship. A man who flinches when people get too close, not because you're afraid of them, but because you're afraid of yourself." Henry's head snapped up, his defenses rising. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," Kate replied, unflinching. "I know you're in pain, and not just from that shoulder you favor. I know you're hiding from something or someone, maybe even yourself. And I know that underneath all that armor you wear, there's a good man who saves children from rattlesnakes and treats horses with more gentleness than he treats himself." "Kate," Henry set his plate aside and stood, needing to move, needing distance. "You should go. This was nice of you, but what? But you're going to push me away like you push everyone away." Kate stood too, leaving her own plate behind to follow him to the porch railing. "Henry, I've only been here a few weeks, but I recognize pain when I see it. I'm not asking you to share all your secrets or bare your soul. I'm just asking you to let someone be your friend." "I'm not good at that," Henry admitted, the words dragged from somewhere deep inside. "I'm not good at much of anything except messing things up and disappointing people." "I don't believe that for a second," Kate said firmly. She moved to stand beside him, close enough that he could smell lavender soap and sunshine. "Tell me one thing, just one thing that would help me understand, please." Henry closed his eyes, fighting an internal battle. The walls he had built were strong, but Kate's gentle persistence was like water wearing away stone. Maybe if he told her just a piece of it, She would understand why he needed to stay apart, and she would stop trying to get close. "I was a soldier," he said finally. "Fought in several campaigns after the war, keeping the peace or making war depending on how you looked at it. Got this shoulder wound in a skirmish that never should have happened. But that's not the worst of it." He paused, and Kate waited patiently, not pushing but clearly listening with her whole attention. "There was a woman," Henry continued, his voice rough. "Anna. We were engaged to be married. I thought I was going to have the life everyone dreams about: a wife, a home, maybe children eventually. But the injury messed me up, Kate, not just physically. I had nightmares, fits of anger I could not control. I scared her. Hell, I scared myself." "What happened?" Kate asked softly. "She left," Henry said bluntly. "And she was right to. I was a mess, broken in ways that did not show but were there all the same. She told me I was not the man she agreed to marry anymore, and she was right. I was not. I'm still not that man. I don't think I ever will be again." The silence that followed felt heavy, full of all the things Henry could not say about the nightmares that still came sometimes, about the way loud noises made him reach for weapons that were not there, about the guilt that ate at him for things he had done in the name of duty. "Henry," Kate said eventually, and her voice held no pity, only a fierce certainty that surprised him. "That woman was a fool." He turned to look at her, startled. "What?" "Anna was a fool," Kate repeated. "Not because she could not handle your pain, that's her right, to make choices about what she can and cannot bear. But she was a fool because she did not understand that you are still the same man, just tested and shaped by hard experiences. You're not broken, Henry. You're wounded." "There's a difference." "Is there?" Henry asked bitterly. "Because from where I'm standing, it feels like the same thing." "Of course there is," Kate insisted. She reached out hesitantly, then seemed to make a decision and took his left hand, the one attached to the bad shoulder, the one that did not work quite right. "Broken means beyond repair, damaged beyond use. Wounded means hurt but healing, changed but still whole in the ways that matter. You saved a child today, Henry. You've been kind to me even when you were trying to push me away. Those are not the actions of a broken man." Henry looked down at their joined hands, Kate small and soft against his large and scarred. He should pull away. He should maintain his distance and protect them both from the inevitable disappointment. But the warmth of her touch and the conviction in her voice were chipping away at his resolve. "You don't know me well enough to make those judgments," he said, but the protest sounded weak even to his own ears. "Then let me get to know you better," Kate challenged. "What are you so afraid of, Henry? That I'll see who you really are and run away? Or that I'll see who you really are and stay?" The question hit too close to home, exposing a truth Henry had been avoiding. He was afraid Kate would stay, would get close enough to see all his damage, and then he would fail her the way he had failed Anna. He would have another nightmare and wake her with his shouting. He would drop something because his shoulder gave out at the wrong moment, and she would see his weakness. He would not be enough, and watching her realize it would destroy what little remained of his heart. "I can't give you what you deserve," Henry said quietly, pulling his hand gently from hers. "I can't be the man who takes you to dances and makes you laugh without shadows in his eyes. I can't promise I won't wake up screaming from dreams I can't explain. I can't—" "Did I ask for promises?" Kate interrupted. "Did I ask you to be anything other than who you are right now, standing on this porch, trying so hard to protect me from yourself that you are not seeing what I'm trying to tell you?" "And what's that?" Henry asked, almost afraid of the answer. "That I like who you are," Kate said simply. "The man who's gentle with horses and children. The man who saved Tommy without a thought for himself. The man who's been hurt but still has kindness in him, even when he tries to hide it behind walls and gruffness. That's who I see," Henry Palmer. Not your scars or your nightmares or your wounded shoulder. You. Henry felt something crack inside his chest, a fissure in the walls he had built so carefully. Kate was looking at him like he was worth something, like he mattered, and he wanted desperately to believe her even as his fear screamed that this could only end in disaster. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, the confession costing him. "I don't know how to let someone in when I've spent so long keeping everyone out." "We could figure it out together," Kate suggested, a tentative hope in her voice. "One step at a time, no expectations beyond maybe sharing a meal now and then or a conversation. Let me be your friend first, Henry. We can worry about anything else later." It was such a reasonable request, so simple on the surface, and yet Henry knew it was the first step towards something that terrified him. But Kate was standing there with her green eyes full of determination, and her hand extended like she was offering him a lifeline, and he found himself reaching out to take it. "One step at a time," he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can probably manage that." Kate's smile was radiant, like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "That's all I'm asking." They finished their meal on the porch as the stars emerged overhead, and for the first time in longer than Henry could remember, the silence felt comfortable rather than suffocating. Kate told him about her childhood in Boston, about her decision to come west and teach, because she wanted adventure and purpose. Henry found himself sharing small pieces of his own history, nothing too deep or dark. Just surface memories of growing up on a farm in Missouri, of learning to work with horses from his father, of simpler times before the war changed everything. When Kate finally left, thanking him for the company and making him promise to stop by the schoolhouse sometime, Henry sat back down on his porch and stared up at the night sky. Something had shifted inside him, a tiny crack in the armor that both terrified and thrilled him. He told himself he was a fool, that this could only end in pain for both of them, but a small voice he had thought long dead whispered that maybe, just maybe, Kate Turner saw something in him worth salvaging. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and growing friendship. Kate proved true to her word, never pushing for more than Henry could give but consistently present in his life. She stopped by the livery to chat while he worked, brought him lunch on days when she knew he would otherwise skip meals, and somehow convinced him to attend one of her evening reading sessions at the schoolhouse. Henry sat in the back of that first session, uncomfortable on the small chair and acutely aware he was the only man in attendance. The others were mostly women and a few older children, all gathered around as Kate read aloud from a novel about adventure on the high seas. Her voice was expressive and engaging, bringing the words to life in a way that drew everyone in. "What did you think?" Kate asked him afterward as he helped her straighten the classroom. "You're a good teacher," Henry said honestly. "You make the story come alive. But did you enjoy it?" "The story itself," Kate pressed. Henry considered the question. "I did, actually. I used to read more before life got in the way," Kate supplied gently when he trailed off. "Something like that." Henry set the last chair in place and looked around the neat schoolroom. Children's drawings decorated one wall, and the chalkboard held the remains of arithmetic lessons. It was a space full of hope and potential, so different from the places Henry usually inhabited. "You've made this into something special here." "I want it to be more than just a place to learn facts," Kate explained, her eyes shining with passion. "I want it to be a place where people, children and adults alike, discover they are capable of more than they thought, where they find possibilities they did not know existed." "Is that what you're trying to do with me?" Henry asked, the question emerging before he could stop it. "Show me possibilities." Kate met his gaze steadily. "I'm trying to be your friend, Henry. If that opens up possibilities, well, I suppose that would be nice. But I meant what I said about no expectations. I enjoy your company. Is that so hard to believe? A bit, Henry admitted. I'm not the most entertaining fellow. You're more entertaining than you give yourself credit for, Kate countered. You just hide it under layers of self-protection. But I see glimpses sometimes, the dry humor, the sharp observations, the kindness you try to pretend is not there. Those glimpses are worth the patience it takes to find them. Henry felt heat rise in his cheeks, unused to such direct compliments. You're too generous with your assessments. And you're too harsh with yours, Kate replied. She gathered her shawl and the book they had been reading, then paused at the door. Walk me home. Mrs. Sullivan worries if I'm out too late. The walk to Mrs. Sullivan's boarding house became a regular occurrence, a routine that Henry found himself looking forward to with an eagerness that both pleased and worried him. On those walks, their conversations ranged from the mundane to the philosophical, and Henry discovered that Kate had a mind as sharp as any he had encountered and opinions on everything from politics to the best way to make cornbread. You should have been a lawyer instead of a teacher, he teased her one evening after a particularly spirited debate about land rights. Women cannot be lawyers, Kate pointed out with a wry smile. Or at least, they're not supposed to be. Teaching is one of the few respectable professions open to us, and I do love it. But sometimes I think about all the other things I might have done if I had been born male. The world's loss, Henry said quietly. You would have been formidable in court. I'm formidable in the classroom, Kate replied with a laugh. You should see me handle a room full of restless children on a Friday afternoon. That takes skills no lawyer could match. They had reached Mrs. Sullivan's porch, and Henry found himself reluctant to end the evening. It had become increasingly difficult to say goodbye to Kate, to watch her disappear inside and return to his empty room. The loneliness he had grown accustomed to now felt like a burden rather than the protective shield he had convinced himself it was. Henry, Kate said softly, her hand on the porch railing. Can I ask you something? Of course, he replied, though his guard immediately went up. The nightmares you mentioned, do you still have them? Henry tensed, not expecting that question. Sometimes, he admitted. Less frequently than before, but yes, they still come. What happens when they do? How do you manage them? He looked at her curiously. Why do you want to know? Because they're part of you, Kate said simply. Because if we're going to be friends, real friends, then I want to understand all the parts, not just the easy ones. Henry was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with the instinct to deflect or minimize. But Kate's expression was open and genuinely curious, without a trace of the pity he had learned to hate. I wake up, he said finally. Sometimes shouting, sometimes just in a cold sweat. My heart's racing like I've run a mile. It takes a while to remember where I am, to convince myself that what I was dreaming about is not happening anymore. What do you dream about? Kate asked gently. Henry shook his head. I can't talk about that, not yet, maybe not ever. That's all right, Kate assured him. I'm not trying to push, I just want to know how to help if the situation ever arises. Help, Henry repeated, puzzled. Yes, help. If we're friends and you're struggling, I want to know how to be there for you. Do you want someone to talk to afterward? Do you need space? What helps you come back from those dark places? No one had ever asked him that before. Anna had either ignored the nightmares or gotten upset by them, making him feel even worse for disturbing her sleep. The idea that someone might want to help him through them rather than just tolerate them or flee from them was entirely foreign. I don't know, Henry said honestly. I've always just dealt with them alone. Well, maybe that does not have to be the case anymore, Kate suggested. Something to think about, at least. She squeezed his hand briefly, then went inside, leaving Henry standing on the porch with his mind spinning. He walked back to his room in a daze, Kate's words echoing in his thoughts. Could someone really help with the nightmares? Could he actually share that burden instead of carrying it alone? That night, as if summoned by the conversation, the nightmares came. Henry woke before dawn with his heart hammering and his sheets soaked with sweat. The dream images still vivid behind his eyes, fire and screaming, and the face of a young soldier whose name he had never learned, dying in the dirt while Henry tried desperately to stop the bleeding. He gave up on sleep and went to the livery early, losing himself in the familiar routine of feeding and grooming the horses. By the time Marcus arrived, Henry had already mucked out half the stalls and was working on repairing a broken stall door. "You're here early," Marcus observed. "Everything all right?" "Could not sleep," Henry muttered, focusing on the wood he was sanding. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "You know, I had nightmares for years after my time in the war. Wife learned to just put a gentle hand on my shoulder when I'd start thrashing, say my name quietly until I came around. Helped more than anything else ever did." Henry looked up, surprised. He had not known Marcus served. The older man saw his expression and nodded. "Got out in '65, went home to my family and tried to forget everything I'd seen. But the forgetting does not work like we hope it will, does it? The memories find ways to stick around." "They do," Henry agreed quietly. "Kate Turner stopped by yesterday asking about you," Marcus continued, his tone carefully casual. "Wanted to know if you were eating regular, if you seemed well. I told her you were doing fine, but that you keep yourself too much alone." "Marcus, now hold on," the older man interrupted. "I'm not meddling, just making an observation. That young lady cares about you, Henry. And unless I'm reading the signs all wrong, you care about her too. So what are you so afraid of?" It was the second time someone had asked him that question, and Henry still did not have a good answer beyond the vague fears that had been controlling his life for too long. "I'm afraid I'm not capable of giving her what she needs," he finally said. "I'm afraid I'll fail her like I've failed everyone else." "Or," Marcus countered, "you might not. You might find that having someone by your side makes the hard times easier to bear. You might discover that you're more capable than you give yourself credit for. But you'll never know if you don't take the chance." Before Henry could respond, they heard a commotion in the street, horses approaching fast and voices calling for help. Both men dropped their tools and rushed outside to find a small group of riders, one supporting another who was slumped in the saddle with blood staining his shirt. "Bandits on the eastern road," one of the men gasped. "They hit the supply wagon. We fought them off, but Cisco took a bullet. We need the doctor." Henry was already moving, helping ease the wounded man down from his horse. "Marcus, fetch Doc Wilson. I'll get him inside and try to slow the bleeding." They carried Cisco into the livery's small office and laid him on the desk, clearing away papers and tools. The wound was in his side, bleeding steadily but not spurting, which meant it had missed the major vessels. Henry grabbed clean rags and pressed them firmly against the injury while Cisco groaned in pain. "Stay with me," Henry told him. "Doc's coming. You're going to be fine." The next hour was a blur of activity. Doc Wilson arrived and took over, removing the bullet and stitching Cisco up while Henry assisted, his battlefield experience making him useful in ways he had not been in years. By the time it was over, Cisco was stable and resting, and the sheriff had been called to investigate the bandit attack. Henry stepped outside to wash the blood from his hands, his own demons temporarily forgotten in the crisis. But as the adrenaline faded, he found himself shaking, memories of other wounded men and other desperate situations flooding back. "Henry," Kate's voice cut through the chaos in his mind. She appeared at his side, concern etched on her face. Mrs. Sullivan told me what happened. Are you all right? I'm fine, he said automatically, then caught himself. No, actually, I'm not, but I will be. Kate's expression softened. What can I do? Henry looked at her, at the genuine care and worry in her eyes, and felt something inside him shift decisively. This woman kept showing up, kept offering support, kept seeing him as worth the effort despite all his protests and warnings. Maybe it was time to stop pushing her away and start believing what she kept trying to tell him. Just stay, he said quietly. If you don't mind, just stay for a while. Kate took his hand, her grip warm and steady. As long as you need. They sat together on the bench outside the livery, not talking much, just existing in companionable silence while Henry's heartbeat slowly returned to normal and the shaking eased. Other people came and went, dealing with the aftermath of the bandit attack and checking on Cisco's condition, but Henry barely noticed them. His awareness had narrowed to the feeling of Kate's hand in his and the gradual calming of his racing thoughts. You were very capable in there, Kate said eventually. Doc Wilson said you knew exactly what to do. Battlefield experience, Henry replied. Some things you never forget, even when you wish you could. It's not a bad thing being able to help in a crisis, Kate pointed out. Those skills saved that man's life today. I suppose, Henry acknowledged. He was quiet for a moment, then added, thank you. For what? For staying. For not asking a bunch of questions or making a fuss, just being here. It helps more than you probably realize. Kate squeezed his hand. That's what friends do, Henry. They show up. They stay. They don't run at the first sign of struggle. The emphasis on her last words was subtle but clear, and Henry understood she was making a point about Anna and maybe about his own self-imposed isolation. He looked at Kate, really looked at her, taking in the determination in her eyes and the strength in the set of her shoulders. This was no fragile flower who would wilt at the first hardship. This was a woman who had traveled across the country alone to pursue her dreams, who stood up to drunk troublemakers and commanded classrooms full of rowdy children. This was someone who might actually be capable of handling whatever came. I'm starting to believe you, he said softly. Good, Kate replied with a small smile. It's about time. The bandit attack created ripples through San Diego for days afterward. The sheriff formed a posse to track down the criminals, and the town council called meetings about improving security on the Eastern Road. Henry found himself volunteering to ride with the posse, his skills with horses and guns making him a valuable addition despite his injured shoulder. Kate was not happy about this development. She appeared at the livery the evening before the posse was due to ride out, her expression stormy. Tell me you're not really planning to go chase after armed bandits, she said without preamble. I can handle myself, Henry replied, checking his saddle and gear. That's not the point. Kate's voice rose slightly, then she visibly controlled herself. Henry, you could get hurt, or worse. I could also help catch dangerous men and make the roads safer for everyone, Henry countered. Including you and your students when you take that field trip you were planning to the mission. Don't try to make this about protecting me, Kate said, but her anger was fading into worry. I'm not Anna, Henry. I'm not going to fall apart if you face danger. But I am going to tell you that I care what happens to you, and the thought of you deliberately riding into harm's way scares me. Henry set down the saddle he had been checking and turned to face her fully. Kate, this is who I am. A man who helps when he can, who does not sit by when there's trouble that needs handling. If that's going to be a problem, it's not a problem, Kate interrupted. It's just. Henry, these past few weeks, getting to know you, spending time together, it's meant something to me. You mean something to me. The idea of you getting hurt matters. The raw honesty in her voice hit Henry like a physical blow. He had known Kate cared, had seen evidence of it in countless small ways, but hearing her state it so plainly was different. It made it real in a way that both thrilled and terrified him. "I'll be careful," he promised. "The sheriff's organizing this properly, and we're not going to take unnecessary risks. We'll track them, call for backup from the federal marshals if needed, and do this by the book." "Promise me," Kate insisted, closing the distance between them. "Promise me you'll come back." "Kate," Henry wanted to tell her not to make promises he might not be able to keep, that life was uncertain and danger was real, but the look in her eyes stopped him. "I promise I'll do everything in my power to come back safely." She nodded, then surprised him by stepping forward and wrapping her arms around him in a tight embrace. Henry froze for a moment, unused to such physical affection, then slowly brought his arms up to return the hug. Kate fit perfectly against his chest, and he found himself breathing in the lavender scent of her hair and memorizing the feeling of holding her. "I'll be waiting," Kate whispered against his shirt. "You better keep that promise, Henry Palmer." The posse rode out at dawn, 6 men including Henry and the sheriff. They followed the bandits' trail eastward, tracking them through the scrub brush and desert terrain that characterized the area beyond San Diego. Henry's skills as a tracker proved useful, and by the second day they had caught up enough to see campfire smoke in the distance. "We'll wait for the federal marshals like we planned," Sheriff Davidson decided. "Send a rider back to town to inform them of our location." "Henry, you have the best eyes. What can you tell me about their setup?" Henry studied the distant camp through his field glasses, noting the positions of the men and their horses. 4 men visible, maybe more in the tent. They're armed but not keeping a very good watch. "Looks like they don't think anyone followed them this far." "Good," the sheriff said grimly. "We'll keep our distance and maintain surveillance until the marshals arrive. I want these men taken alive if possible to stand trial." The waiting was harder than the tracking had been. Henry and the others took turns watching the bandit camp while maintaining their own hidden position. During his watch, Henry found his thoughts drifting to Kate, to the feel of her in his arms and the worry in her voice when she made him promise to return. When had he started thinking of going back to San Diego as going home? When had Kate's presence become something he looked forward to rather than feared? Somewhere in the past few weeks, without him quite noticing when it happened, she had slipped past all his defenses and planted herself firmly in his heart. The realization should have terrified him, but instead, Henry felt a curious sense of peace. Yes, loving Kate because he could admit to himself now that it was love meant opening himself up to potential pain. But it also meant opening himself up to joy and connection, and all the things he had been denying himself for far too long. The federal marshals arrived on the 3rd day, and the combined force moved on the bandit camp at dawn. The criminals, outnumbered and caught by surprise, surrendered without much fight. One tried to run and took a shot at the marshals, but no one was seriously injured in the brief exchange of gunfire. By midday, the bandits were in chains, and the posse was heading back to San Diego in triumph. They rode into town to cheers and congratulations, with people lining the street to welcome them home. Henry's eyes scanned the crowd automatically, looking for one specific face. He found Kate standing outside the schoolhouse, her students gathered around her. When their eyes met, the relief and joy on her face was so intense it took his breath away. Henry barely remembered dismounting or handing off his horse. He was walking toward Kate, and then she was running toward him, and then she was in his arms again, and he was lifting her slightly off her feet in the fierce embrace. The crowd around them whooped and hollered, but Henry did not care about propriety or what people might think. All that mattered was that he had kept his promise and Kate was here, solid and real in his arms. "You came back," she said unnecessarily, her face buried in his shoulder. "I promised," Henry replied, setting her gently back on her feet but keeping his arms around her. "Kate, we need to talk." "Yes," she agreed. "Yes, we do." They found privacy that evening, taking a walk beyond the town limits to where the desert stretched out under a spectacular sunset. Henry had spent the afternoon trying to figure out what to say, how to explain what he was feeling without sounding like a fool or scaring her off. "I've been thinking," he started, then stopped. "Actually, that's not quite right. I've been feeling, which is new for me. Or at least, it's been a long time since I let myself feel anything beyond the basics." Kate waited patiently for him to continue, her hand clasped in his as they walked. "When you first came to town, I thought you were trouble," Henry continued. "Not bad trouble, just complicated. Someone who would disrupt the careful equilibrium I had constructed. I was right about that, but I was wrong about it being a bad thing." "Henry, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "Please. I need to say this while I have the courage. You told me once that I was wounded, not broken. That there was a difference. I did not believe you then, but I'm starting to now. These past weeks, getting to know you, letting you get to know me, it's been terrifying and wonderful in equal measure." They had stopped walking, and Henry turned to face Kate directly, taking both her hands in his. "When I was out there with the posse, all I could think about was coming back to you. Not back to San Diego, but to you specifically. That's when I realized that you've become essential. Like air or water or sunlight. I don't just want to be your friend, Kate. I want to be more if you'll have me. I know I'm damaged goods and I come with complications." But Kate stopped his words by reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "Henry Palmer, for a smart man you can be remarkably foolish. I've been half in love with you since you saved Tommy from that snake, maybe even before that. Why do you think I've been so persistent about getting close to you? I saw something worth fighting for. But what about the nightmares, the bad days when I can't shake the memories? What about them?" Kate challenged. "Henry, do you think I'm so fragile that a few bad days will send me running? Do you think love, real love, only exists in perfect moments with undamaged people? Life is messy and complicated, and people are beautifully imperfect. I don't want some idealized version of you. I want the real Henry Palmer, scars and all." Henry felt emotion rising in his throat, making it hard to speak. "I don't deserve you. That's not your decision to make," Kate said firmly. "I get to decide what I deserve and what I want, and I want you, all of you. The gentle man who's kind to horses. The brave man who faces danger to protect others. The wounded man who's still learning to heal. The man who makes me laugh and challenges me and looks at me like I'm the most important person in the world. That's who I want, Henry. If you want me too, then stop pushing me away and let yourself have something good." Henry looked into Kate's eyes, seeing the absolute certainty there, the love offered freely without conditions or reservations. How could he refuse such a gift? How could he keep running from the one thing he wanted most? "I want you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "God help me, I want you more than I've wanted anything in my entire life." Kate's smile was radiant. "Then kiss me, you foolish man." Henry did not need to be told twice. He pulled Kate into his arms and kissed her as the sun set over the California desert, pouring all his longing and fear and desperate hope into the contact. Kate kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms wrapped around his neck, and for the first time in years, Henry felt something that might have been happiness stirring in his chest. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kate laughed with pure joy. That was worth waiting for. "I should have done that weeks ago," Henry admitted. "You did it now. That's what matters." Kate took his hand and they started walking again, heading back toward town in the gathering darkness. "So what happens next?" "I was hoping you might help me figure that out," Henry said. "I'm new at this, at letting someone in, at planning a future beyond the next day's work." "Well," Kate said thoughtfully, "we could start by courting properly. You could come to dinner at Mrs. Sullivan's, take me to church socials, maybe even dance with me at the Harvest Festival next month." "I'm not much of a dancer," Henry warned. "I'm not much concerned with dancing skill," Kate replied. "I'm more interested in spending time together, getting to know each other even better, letting this," she gestured between them, "develop naturally." "I can do that," Henry agreed. "Though I should warn you, proper courting means people will talk, have expectations." "Let them," Kate said confidently. "I'm not ashamed of caring about you, Henry, and if gossip bothers you, we could always give them something real to talk about." "Like what?" Henry asked, amused by her boldness. "Like the fact that I'm in love with you and have no intention of hiding it," Kate declared. "Like the fact that you're the best man I've ever met, and anyone who can't see that is blind. Like the fact that I intend to marry you someday if you'll have me, and spend the rest of my life proving that you were always enough, always worthy, always deserving of love." Henry stopped walking again, overwhelmed by Kate's words. "You'd marry me? Is that really so surprising?" Kate asked. "Henry, I don't say things I don't mean. Yes, I would marry you. I will marry you if you want the same thing. Maybe not tomorrow or next month, but eventually. When you're ready. When you believe it too." "I believe it," Henry heard himself say, the words emerging from some deep place of certainty. "Maybe I don't believe I deserve it yet, but I believe you mean it. And Kate, I would be honored to be your husband whenever you're ready to take on a stubborn, damaged cowboy with more issues than he knows what to do with." "You're not damaged, you're human," Kate corrected, rising on her toes to kiss him again. "And yes, Henry Palmer, yes to courting, and yes to marriage, and yes to building a life together. Yes to all of it." They sealed the agreement with another kiss, and by the time they reached Mrs. Sullivan's boarding house, Henry felt like he was walking on air. Mrs. Sullivan took one look at their joined hands and knowing expressions and smiled knowingly. "About time," she said to Kate. "I've been telling everyone you two were meant for each other since the first week." The courtship that followed was unlike anything Henry had experienced before. With Anna, everything had felt like an obligation, a series of steps to check off on the path to acceptable adult life. With Kate, every moment felt like a choice, a conscious decision to open up, to share, to let someone pass the walls he had built. True to her word, Kate took him to church socials and community gatherings, introducing him to people as her beau with obvious pride. Henry, who had spent months avoiding social situations, found himself drawn into the life of the community through Kate's enthusiasm. He discovered that, when he stopped trying to hide, people were actually quite welcoming. His reputation as the man who saved Tommy and rode with the posse had elevated him from that quiet fellow at the livery to a respected member of the town. The nightmares still came occasionally, but now Henry knew he did not have to face them alone. The first time it happened, after they had officially started courting, Kate was informed by Mrs. Sullivan the next morning and showed up at his door with breakfast and a sympathetic ear. "Want to talk about it?" she asked simply, setting down a basket of fresh biscuits and eggs. "Not particularly," Henry admitted, "but I wouldn't mind the company while I eat." They sat together on his small porch, Kate chattering about her students and the upcoming school play while Henry slowly came back to himself. She did not push or pry, just filled the space with normalcy until the shadows receded. It was exactly what he needed, though he had not known it until she provided it. "Thank you," he said when they finished eating, "for understanding, for not making a fuss." "Everyone has hard days," Kate said simply. The measure of a relationship is not whether hard days exist, but how you face them together. As autumn deepened into winter, Henry and Kate became a familiar sight around San Diego, walking together after church, sharing meals at the restaurant, or sitting on Mrs. Sullivan's porch in the evening talking about everything and nothing. Henry found himself laughing more than he had in years, the sound startling him every time it emerged. "You have a nice laugh," Kate told him one evening. "You should do it more often." "I'm working on it," Henry replied, squeezing her hand. "You make it easier." For Christmas, Henry saved up to buy Kate a beautiful shawl he saw in the general store, blue as a summer sky and soft as down. Kate's gift to him was a leather-bound journal and fountain pen, along with a note that said, "For writing down the good memories, so they'll eventually outnumber the bad ones." Henry was embarrassed to find tears in his eyes as he read it. "Kate, it's practical," Kate said, though her own eyes were suspiciously bright. "And hopefully meaningful. You told me once that you feel like the bad memories overwhelm everything else. So let's start building up the good ones and writing them down so you can't forget them." That night, Henry made his first entry in the journal. "Today Kate gave me a gift that felt like a promise. The promise that there will be enough good days to fill these pages. The promise that my future can be different from my past. The promise that I'm worth the effort." I'm starting to believe it might be true. Spring came to Southern California with a burst of wildflowers and warming temperatures. The school year was winding down, and Kate was already planning for the next one, full of ideas for expanding the curriculum and adding new programs. Henry listened to her enthusiastic plans with a mixture of admiration and amusement. Kate's energy seemed limitless, her optimism infectious. "I've been thinking," Henry said one evening as they walked along the outskirts of town, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "About the future, about us." "Oh," Kate's eyes sparkled with interest. "We've been courting for nearly 6 months now," Henry continued. "And I know we said we'd take our time, let things develop naturally, but Kate, I wake up every morning thinking about you. I go to sleep every night grateful that you're in my life. I don't need more time to know what I already know in my bones." He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Catherine Turner, I love you. I am absolutely, completely, irrevocably in love with you. You've shown me that I was never as broken as I thought, that my wounds don't define me, that I'm capable of being the man you deserve. I don't have much to offer, just a job at a livery, a small room, and a heart that's been battered but is still beating. But if that's enough, if I'm enough, then I would be honored if you'd consent to be my wife." Kate's smile was radiant, tears streaming down her face as she nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Henry, yes, of course, yes. You've always been enough, more than enough. You're everything I want and everything I need." Henry pulled a small box from his pocket, a simple gold band he had been carrying around for the past week, waiting for the right moment. "It's not fancy," he said as he slid it onto her finger, "but it's honest, like us, like what we have together." "It's perfect," Kate breathed, admiring the way the ring caught the light. "You're perfect." "Well, not perfect, because neither of us is that, but perfect for me." They laughed together, and Henry pulled Kate into his arms, kissing her thoroughly as the California sun set behind them. When they finally broke apart, both grinning like fools, Kate rested her head against his chest. "When should we get married?" she asked practically. "I need to finish out the school year, and we'll need to find a place to live. Your room is far too small for 2 people, and there are 1,000 things to plan." "How about late June?" Henry suggested. "After school lets out, that gives us a few months to get everything ready. And as for a place to live, I've been talking to Marcus. He's thinking of retiring soon, maybe moving closer to his daughter in Los Angeles. He's offered to sell me the livery, including the house that comes with it." Kate pulled back to look at him, eyes wide. "Henry, that's wonderful. Your own business. But can we afford it?" "I've been saving," Henry admitted. "And Marcus is willing to work out a payment plan. It'll be tight for a while, but I think we can manage it. The house needs work, but it's solid with 3 bedrooms and a real kitchen. Room for—" He trailed off, suddenly shy. "Room for a family," Kate finished softly. "Henry Palmer, are you telling me you've been planning our future down to the house we'll live in and the children we'll have?" "Is that presumptuous?" Henry asked, worried he had overstepped. "It's perfect," Kate declared, kissing him again. "It's everything I wanted but was afraid to push for. Yes, let's buy the livery. Yes, let's get married in June. Yes, let's fill that house with love and laughter and eventually children. Yes to all of it." The next few months passed in a whirlwind of activity. Henry finalized the arrangements to buy the livery from Marcus, working extra hours to save every penny he could toward the down payment. Kate finished her school year with characteristic enthusiasm, while also planning their wedding with help from Mrs. Sullivan and several other town women who had adopted her as one of their own. The house that came with the livery was indeed solid, but needed considerable work. Henry spent his evenings sanding floors, patching walls, and making repairs while Kate helped when she could, offering opinions on colors and arrangements. Working together on making the house a home felt right, another step in building their shared future. "I never thought I'd have this," Henry admitted one evening as they painted what would be their bedroom. "A home, a wife, a future that looks bright instead of dark. 6 months ago I was just going through the motions, existing but not really living. And now—" Kate prompted, pausing in her painting to look at him. "Now I'm living," Henry said simply. "Really living for the first time in years. You did that, Kate. You saw something in me worth saving and you didn't give up until I saw it too." "You did the hard work yourself," Kate replied. "I just reminded you that you were capable of it. Henry, you were never as broken as you believed. Wounded, yes. Hurting, absolutely. But the core of who you are, the kindness, the strength, the integrity that was always there. I just helped you remember it." Their wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect June morning that felt like a blessing. The ceremony was held at the small church in town, with what seemed like the entire population of San Diego in attendance. Henry stood at the altar in his best suit new, purchased specifically for the occasion, and watched Kate walk down the aisle with tears in his eyes. She was beautiful in a simple white dress, her dark hair crowned with wildflowers, her eyes locked on his with absolute certainty. When she reached him and took his hands, Henry felt something settle into place inside him, like a bone snapping back into its proper position after being displaced for too long. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but Henry barely heard the words. All his attention was focused on Kate, on the miracle of her presence in his life, on the future they were about to pledge to each other. When it came time for the vows, Henry spoke from his heart rather than just repeating the traditional words. "Kate, you showed me I was never too broken for love. You proved that my wounds don't define me, that my past doesn't have to dictate my future. You gave me back my life, my hope, my belief in tomorrow. I promise to spend the rest of my days showing you what a gift that was. I promise to be the husband you deserve, to support your dreams, to face whatever comes with you by my side. I promise to love you with everything I am, for as long as I draw breath." There was not a dry eye in the church when he finished, and Kate was openly crying as she spoke her own vows. "Henry, you thought you were broken, but I saw a man who was brave enough to keep going even when everything hurt. I saw strength and kindness, and a heart that refused to give up despite everything it had been through. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done. Being loved by you is the greatest honor of my life. I promise to stand by you through good days and hard ones, to remind you of your worth whenever you forget, to build a life with you that's full of joy and purpose and love. I'm yours, Henry Palmer, today and always. The kiss that sealed their marriage was tender and full of promise, and when they turned to face their community as husband and wife, the applause was thunderous. The reception that followed was a joyful affair, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the evening. Henry, true to his word about not being much of a dancer, awkwardly led Kate through several dances while she laughed and told him he was doing fine. "Just hold me and sway," she instructed. "That's all dancing really is at its core." As the evening wound down and they finally made their way to their new home, both of theirs together, Henry felt a peace he had never imagined possible. The house glowed with lamplight, welcoming them inside to the life they had built together. "Happy?" Kate asked as they stood in the kitchen, her arms wrapped around his waist. "More than I knew how to be," Henry replied honestly. "Kate, thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For seeing something worth loving when I couldn't see it myself. For showing me I was exactly enough, just as I am." Kate reached up to kiss him gently. "You're more than enough, Henry. You always were. I'm just glad you finally believe it." Their first year of marriage was an adventure in learning to share space and build a life together. Kate continued teaching, throwing herself into her work with characteristic passion while Henry ran the livery and gradually expanded the business. They developed routines and rhythms, learning each other's habits and preferences, navigating the inevitable small conflicts that came with combining two lives into one. The nightmares still came occasionally, but true to Kate's word, they faced them together. The first time Henry woke shouting in the middle of the night with Kate beside him, he was terrified of her reaction. But she simply placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, spoke his name quietly until he fully woke, and then held him while he came back to himself. "I'm sorry," he gasped when he could speak again. "I'm so sorry you have to deal with this." "Henry, stop," Kate said firmly. "We're partners. Your struggles are my struggles. Your pain is my pain. That's what marriage means, facing everything together. Now, do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to just hold you until you can sleep again?" "Just hold me," Henry whispered, and Kate did, her presence anchoring him to the present and reminding him that he was safe, he was home, he was loved. By their first anniversary, Henry realized the nightmares were coming less frequently, the good memories slowly beginning to outnumber the bad ones, just as Kate had predicted. The journal she had given him was half full of happy moments: their wedding day, the first time they successfully hosted a dinner party, the day Kate came home excited about a student's breakthrough, the quiet Sunday mornings they spent together in peaceful domesticity. "I want to add something to your journal," Kate announced one evening in late summer. They were sitting on the porch of their home, watching the sunset like they did most evenings when weather permitted. "You want to write in my memory book?" Henry asked, amused. "Just one entry," Kate confirmed. "Something I want you to remember, to be able to look back on." She took the journal and pen from him and wrote carefully, then handed it back. Henry read her words aloud. "Today I told my husband that we're going to have a baby. He looked at me like I had just handed him the moon and stars. He told me he never imagined he could be this happy, this blessed. I told him he deserved every bit of happiness and more. I told him he's going to be an amazing father. I told him I love him. This is our new adventure, and I cannot wait to see where it leads." Henry looked up from the journal, his eyes wet with tears. "Kate, we're really," Kate confirmed, her own tears flowing freely. I'm about 3 months along, due in early March if Doc Wilson's calculations are right. Henry, we're going to be parents. Henry set the journal aside carefully and pulled Kate into his arms, overcome with emotion. A baby. Their baby. A child who would grow up in a home full of love, who would never doubt their worth or their place in the world. The magnitude of it was almost too much to process. I'm terrified, he admitted into Kate's hair. What if I mess this up? What if I'm not a good father? What if you're exactly the father our child needs? Kate interrupted gently. Henry, you're kind and patient and strong. You've overcome so much. Those are exactly the qualities a good parent needs. And you won't be doing this alone. We're partners, remember? We'll figure it out together, just like we've figured out everything else. Together, Henry repeated, letting the words settle over him like a blessing. Okay, yes. We're going to have a baby. That's amazing. Kate laughed through her tears. I'm glad you think so because ready or not, it's happening. As Kate's pregnancy progressed, Henry found himself simultaneously excited and anxious. He read every book on parenthood he could get his hands on, asked advice from other fathers in town, and worked on preparing the smallest bedroom to be a nursery. Kate bore his hovering with good humor, assuring him she was fine even as he worried about every symptom and discomfort. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, she reminded him when he fretted about her walking to school. I'm healthy and strong, and Doc Wilson says everything is progressing perfectly. You need to relax a little. I'll relax when the baby is here safe and sound, Henry muttered, earning him an affectionate eye roll. Their son was born on a rainy March morning, arriving slightly early and making his presence known with lusty cries that Henry thought were the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. Doc Wilson placed the baby in Henry's arms, and Henry stared down at the tiny red face in absolute wonder. He's perfect, Henry breathed. Kate, he's absolutely perfect. Of course he is, Kate said from the bed, exhausted but radiant. He's ours. What should we name him? They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never quite settled on one. Now, looking down at his son, Henry knew exactly what felt right. What about Samuel? After my father, he was a good man and I'd like our son to carry that legacy. Samuel Palmer, Kate tested the name. I love it. Welcome to the world, Samuel. Your daddy and I are going to love you so much. Fatherhood transformed Henry in ways he had not anticipated. The love he felt for his son was fierce and immediate, a protective instinct that made him understand his own father better than he ever had before. Samuel was an easy baby, quick to smile and generally content, but even when he was fussy in the middle of the night, Henry found he did not mind. These were the good moments Kate had promised him, the memories that would fill his journal and his heart. You're a natural, Kate observed one evening, watching Henry rock Samuel to sleep with practiced ease. I told you that you'd be a wonderful father. He makes it easy, Henry replied, marveling at his son's tiny features. I look at him and I can't imagine how I ever thought I was too broken for this. He's perfect, Kate. We made something perfect together. We made something loved, Kate corrected gently. Perfect is an illusion, but loved is real. That's what we're giving him, a home full of love where he'll always know he's valued and wanted. As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, Henry documented everything in his journal: first smile, first laugh, first steps, first words. The pages filled rapidly with happy memories, pushing the painful ones further and further into the past. The nightmares had become rare enough that sometimes months went by without one. And even when they came, Henry recovered more quickly with Kate's support and the knowledge that he had a life worth waking up for. San Diego continued to grow and change around them. The railroad finally came through, bringing more people and more opportunities. Henry's livery business thrived, and he eventually hired on 2 young men to help with the workload. Kate took a brief break from teaching after Samuel's birth, but returned part-time when he was old enough, bringing him to the schoolhouse where he charmed everyone with his sweet nature and curious mind. When Samuel was 3, Kate announced she was pregnant again. Their daughter Mary was born on a cool November evening, entering the world with the same determined spirit her mother possessed. Henry fell in love all over again, amazed that his heart had room to expand further to encompass this new life. 2 children, he said wonderingly, holding Mary while Samuel climbed onto the bed to meet his new sister. Kate, we have 2 children, a family I never dreamed. I know, Kate said softly, watching their family with contentment. But you deserve this, Henry. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Do you believe that yet? Henry looked at his wife, his son, his daughter, at the family they had built together from the ruins of his past, and the hope Kate had never stopped offering. Yeah, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Yeah, I think I finally do. The years that followed were full and rich, marked by the normal chaos of raising children and running a business and being part of a community. Samuel grew into a thoughtful boy who loved horses like his father and books like his mother. Mary was fearless and funny, keeping everyone on their toes with her adventurous spirit. Henry's journal collection grew to multiple volumes, each one filled with memories both momentous and mundane. He wrote about Samuel's first day of school and Mary's first birthday. He wrote about expanding the livery to include a stable for breeding horses, about Kate being elected to the school board, about community celebrations and quiet family dinners. But he also wrote about the harder moments, the times when old ghosts still haunted him, when the weight of his past pressed down despite the joy of his present. The difference was that now he had support, had people who helped him through those dark patches instead of facing them alone. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kate surprised Henry by presenting him with a new journal, bound in beautiful tooled leather. Inside the front cover, she had written, "10 years ago, I married a man who thought he was too broken for love. Today, I celebrate a decade with a man who learned he was always exactly enough. Here's to the next 10 years and all the adventures still to come." "I don't know what I did to deserve you," Henry said, pulling Kate close. The children were spending the night at Marcus and his wife's house, giving them rare time alone. "You were yourself," Kate replied simply. "That was always enough, Henry. From that first day when you helped me pick up my scattered belongings, you were enough. You just had to learn to see it." "I see it now," Henry assured her. "Every day when I wake up next to you, every time I hear the children laughing, every moment we spend building this life together, I see it. I'm not broken. I never was. I was just wounded, and wounds heal." "Especially when you have the right medicine," Kate added with a smile. "And apparently I was your medicine." "You were my miracle," Henry corrected. "You are my miracle. You showed me that my scars don't define me, that my past doesn't have to dictate my future, that I'm capable of being loved and giving love in return. You saved my life, Kate." "No," Kate said firmly, cupping his face in her hands. "You saved your own life by choosing to open up, to take a chance, to believe that maybe you were worth the effort. I was just lucky enough to be there to witness it and to share in the beautiful life you built from the ashes of your pain." They made love that night with a tenderness and passion that had only deepened over their years together, and afterward, lying in Kate's arms, Henry felt a contentment so complete it was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness. "For what? For everything. For not giving up on me when I tried to push you away. For seeing past my defenses to the man underneath. For building this life with me. For Samuel and Mary. For every moment of the past 10 years. For showing me I was exactly enough. Kate kissed his shoulder, her arm tightening around him. "You've always been exactly enough, Henry Palmer. I'm just glad you finally know it, too." As Henry drifted off to sleep that night, safe and loved in his wife's embrace, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. From that broken, isolated man standing at the edge of San Diego's dusty street to the husband, father, and businessman he had become, it seemed almost impossible that they were the same person. But they were. He had not erased his past or magically healed all his wounds. He still carried scars, still had moments when the darkness threatened. The difference was that now he knew those things did not define him. He was more than his trauma, more than his pain, more than his fears. He was a man capable of love and worthy of being loved in return. The years continued to pass, bringing the normal mix of joys and challenges that make up a life. Samuel grew into a responsible young man who shared his father's skill with horses and his mother's quick mind. At 16, he started helping run the livery in earnest, showing a natural aptitude for business. Mary, ever the adventurous one, announced at 14 that she wanted to be a doctor, shocking some of the more traditional town members but receiving nothing but encouragement from her parents. "If that's what you want, then we'll find a way to make it happen," Henry told her firmly. "Never let anyone tell you that you can't do something just because of your gender." "Your father's right," Kate added. "The world is changing slowly but surely. Women are finding their voices and their power. You can be anything you want to be, Mary." Henry watched his daughter's face light up with determination and hope, and he thought about how far they had all come. This was what healing looked like, not the absence of scars, but the presence of growth. Not forgetting the past, but not being chained by it either. On a warm evening in late June, as Henry and Kate celebrated 20 years of marriage surrounded by their children, their friends, and the community they had become such an integral part of, Henry found a quiet moment to step outside and breathe in the desert air. Kate found him there, as she always did, slipping her hand into his with the ease of long practice. "Hiding from your own party," she teased gently. "Just taking a moment to appreciate it," Henry replied, pulling her close. 20 years, Kate. 20 years ago, I stood at an altar and promised to love you for the rest of my life. That was the easiest promise I ever made. And you've kept it beautifully," Kate said, resting her head on his shoulder. "We've built something wonderful together, haven't we?" "We have," Henry agreed. "A family, a home, a life full of love and purpose. Things I never thought I'd have, things I didn't think I deserved." "But you do deserve them," Kate insisted, as she had countless times over the years. "You always did, Henry. I'm just glad I was persistent enough to make you see it." Henry laughed, the sound coming easily after years of practice. "Persistent is one word for it. Stubborn might be another." "Hey," Kate protested, poking him in the ribs. "My persistence got you to take a chance on love. I'd say that worked out pretty well." "It worked out perfectly," Henry said seriously, turning to face her fully. "Kate, I know I've said this before, but I need you to know you saved me. Not in some dramatic rescue from danger way, but in the truest sense. You saved me from myself, from the prison of my own making, from a life of isolation and pain. You showed me I was never too broken for love, that my wounds didn't make me unworthy, that I was exactly enough just as I was." Tears shimmered in Kate's eyes. "And you showed me what real strength looks like, the courage to be vulnerable, to let someone in, to keep going even when everything hurts. You showed me that love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about choosing someone real and building something beautiful together, despite the imperfections." They stood there in the gathering dusk, holding each other the way they had 1,000 times before, and Henry felt that familiar peace settle over him. His life was not perfect, no life ever was. He still had scars, still carried memories of darker times, still had moments when the shadows crept in. But he also had this: love and family, purpose and belonging, the knowledge that he was valued and wanted and enough. Samuel appeared in the doorway, Mary beside him. "Mom, Dad, people are asking for the anniversary toast." Henry and Kate exchanged a smile. Then, hand in hand, they returned to the party. As the evening wound down and they finally said goodbye to the last of their guests, the family sat together on the porch of their home, the home that had witnessed so much love and growth over the years. "You two are disgustingly romantic," Mary observed with teenage exasperation, though her tone held affection. 20 years and you still look at each other like you're newlyweds." "That's because we choose to," Kate replied, squeezing Henry's hand. "Every day we choose love. That's the secret, not finding someone perfect, but finding someone worth choosing again and again." "Your mother's right," Henry added, looking at his children. "Love isn't just a feeling, it's a decision. It's choosing to show up, to be present, to work through the hard times and celebrate the good ones. It's about being brave enough to be vulnerable and strong enough to stay when things get difficult." "Is that what you did?" Samuel asked. "Chose to be brave?" Henry thought about the question carefully. "I chose to take a chance," he said finally. "When your mother came into my life, I was convinced I was too damaged to be loved. I had all sorts of reasons why I should keep my distance, why I should protect her from my brokenness." "But your mother was stubborn, persistent," Kate interjected with a smile. "Persistent," Henry corrected with a grin, "and she refused to accept my self-assessment. She saw something in me I couldn't see in myself, and she kept showing up until I was brave enough to believe her. So yes, I chose to be brave. I chose to take a chance on love even when I was terrified, and that choice changed my entire life." Mary leaned against her father's shoulder. "I'm glad you were brave, Dad. Otherwise we wouldn't be here." "Best decision I ever made," Henry said firmly, his arm around his daughter while his other hand remained clasped with Kate's. "Besides choosing to marry your mother in the first place, of course." As the night deepened and the stars emerged overhead, the Palmer family sat together in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts but united in their bond. Henry looked at his wife, his children, his home, and felt a gratitude so profound it threatened to overwhelm him. He thought about that broken man who had stood on San Diego's dusty street all those years ago, convinced he was beyond redemption. If he could go back and tell that version of himself what lay ahead, the love, the family, the life he would build, he doubted that man would have believed it possible. But it had been possible. Kate had seen to that, with her persistence and her faith and her refusal to accept his limitations as permanent. She had shown him that wounded was not the same as broken, that scars could be badges of survival rather than marks of failure, that he was capable of so much more than he had believed. And in the end, that was the greatest gift she had given him, not just her love, though that was precious beyond measure, but the knowledge that he was worthy of that love, that he had always been enough, exactly as he was. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed and Henry and Kate were alone in their room, Henry pulled out his current journal and made an entry. Kate watched him write, a soft smile on her face. "What are you writing?" she asked curiously. Henry finished and read it aloud. 20 years ago, I married the love of my life. Today, we celebrated 2 decades of choosing each other, of building a family, of creating a life I never dared dream possible. Kate showed me I was never too broken for love. She proved that my scars didn't define me. She taught me that I was always exactly enough, just as I was. Tonight, surrounded by our children and our friends, I understand the full truth of what she's been trying to tell me all these years. I was never meant to walk through life alone. I was meant for this, for love and family, for partnership and purpose, for the beautiful imperfection of a life shared with others. I was meant to be exactly who I am, wounds and all, because those wounds made me capable of appreciating the gift I've been given. Thank you, Kate, for never giving up on me. Thank you for showing me the way home. Kate wiped tears from her eyes. Henry, that's beautiful. It's true, Henry said simply, setting the journal aside and pulling Kate into his arms. Every word of it. You saved my life, Kate Turner Palmer. You showed me I was exactly enough. And you showed me what real love looks like, Kate replied, her voice thick with emotion. You showed me that taking a chance on someone wounded is not a risk but an opportunity. You showed me that the strongest people are often those who have been through the hardest trials. You showed me that love can heal, that patience and persistence can work miracles, that believing in someone can help them learn to believe in themselves. They held each other in the quiet darkness of their bedroom. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something extraordinary from the ashes of pain and the seeds of hope. Outside, the California desert stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars, indifferent to human struggles and triumphs. But inside this house, in this room, in this embrace, the universe contracted to something simple and profound, two hearts beating as one, two lives intertwined. Two people who had learned that love was not about perfection but about choosing each other, again and again, through whatever came. Henry Palmer had thought he was too broken for love, but Kate Turner had shown him the truth that he was never broken, only wounded, and wounds could heal. That his scars were proof of survival, not evidence of failure. That he was capable of more than he knew, stronger than he believed, worthy of more than he imagined. She had shown him he was exactly enough, always had been, always would be. And in learning to believe that truth, Henry had discovered something even more important, that the greatest strength was not in being invulnerable, but in being brave enough to be vulnerable. Not in avoiding pain, but in surviving it and allowing it to teach rather than destroy. Not in perfection, but in authentic, honest, imperfect humanity. As sleep finally claimed them, wrapped in each other's arms the way they had been for 20 years and would be for decades more to come, Henry's last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude. He had been given so much more than he deserved, or perhaps he had finally learned to accept what he had deserved all along. Either way, he was home. He was loved. He was exactly enough. And that, he thought as he drifted into peaceful dreams unmarred by nightmares, was everything that mattered.